I like to preface this conversation that we are doing this as a passion project. So we are not here to represent our companies. We happen to work for them. Or as Ken is doing right now, his MBA and career coaching and stuff. So his own business. I guess you could be here for your own business. But I am not like doing this on Microsoft's behalf. I'm doing it because I love to help people. So feel free at any point to drop a question in chat, raise your hand. We have no problem with anybody coming off camera. Hi, Matt, one of my coworkers here from Microsoft. I've been telling my internal division about this, so thanks for coming. But yes, feel free to, this is meant to be an organic conversation. So if you have insights or questions, then by all means, let's put it out there. If we don't know the answer, then I'm happy to try and track it down for later. Particularly if you ping me and remind me that I'm supposed to be tracking down something for later, especially this week because I am in vacation mode. So next week I'll have a substitute because I'm supposed to be on a plane while this is happening. If the flight's delayed, I'll show up. All right. And then today we're talking about kind of the differentiator between like what are PM roles. And I thought Ken would be amazing for that because he has his PM piece. So there's a lot of, you've probably explored product, project, technical program management, things like that. And there are some questions about what do those individual roles look like? And I can only speak to it from a Microsoft perspective. But then since we have typically job seekers or early in career people showing up, there's the option to talk about, well, when you land that first role, how do you kind of hit that first 30, 60, and 90 days running? So, and I know Brenda is probably here because of that more than anything, because she's going to be a new hire very soon. So that's
awesome.
Exciting.
Well, congratulations.
Yes. And all right. So Ken, do you want to do a quick introduction on who you are and why you're here? Any fun insights to get to?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Ken Lewis. I served with the Air Force for 20 years. I retired September 2020. I was in explosive ordnance disposal, which is the military bomb squad. After that, while I was transitioning or preparing for my transition from the Air Force to the civilian sector, I obviously really got involved with a lot of research on how to make myself more marketable because I really didn't want to get into the bomb squad trade when I got out. So how do I do that and try to show my soft skills and other type of skills, and how can I find a role into the civilian market? I ended up doing that. I had a position with the company for about 9 months, and then I turned in my 2-week notice and decided to finish up my MBA program here. And hopefully by the end of June, I should have accomplished that. So I am very passionate about change management, process improvement, project management. I did a lot with helping other veterans get their PMPs as I was in my process. So I was just trying to pass it on as I could. So that's one of the reasons why I'm here. I love to pass on. I love to add value to others wherever I can, and just help others be successful. So if there's even a small tidbit that I can offer, I would like to at least give that an attempt.
And I'm going to have to look you up later because that's my next goal is the PMP itself. But you need like the 3 years of work experience. So I'm about to hit that, and then I'll be ready to run with it.
I've always told people to not underestimate your experience with projects, because if you ever set up a birthday party, that is a project. I mean, the guest, that's your stakeholders, right? Like the parents' stakeholders. It's just a matter of how do you word it. So it helps to be able to use it in their language. And that was one of the things with the military. They've done it. You ever done like an operation where you had to start from the risk from start to finish? You've done it, but you just called it something else. So it's just changing it to a frame of reference that you can understand, and it does help the perspective. So
yeah, well, thank you about that. So the PM role, like I do get a lot of questions like, well, what does a program manager do, or why are you different than a product manager, or why are you different than a product manager? Do you have any insights for those? I know I can speak as like what a PM is in Microsoft, even though we're kind of redefining that term ourselves. So it's a question we're asking internally as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it gets more and more jumbled or diluted when we start bringing in software development and Agile into everything, because you'll have some companies that are IT based that would call you a project manager when actually what they're looking for is maybe a product owner, or maybe a Scrum master or an Agile coach. So if I was to say, in this context, I could talk to a project being a waterfall-based project, and that is saying, yes, you kind of have your defined requirements, you have a schedule, you kind of know how things are going to go. For example, the easiest one to relate to is the construction of a new building. Things kind of have to happen in sequential order for that building to arise. You just can't come up there and like, we're going to do the roof first and go from there. No, things kind of have to follow the status. That would be your waterfall-based project. If I was to flip hats and go into more of the agile world, where now you're a Scrum master or an IT type project manager, then you're looking at that, maybe breaking that up. You don't really know what it's going to look like at the end. You don't know all the steps. You just kind of have a rough idea, and then the things evolve, right? It's iterative. Every 2 weeks, you're delivering something to the customer, to the business owners, and be like, yeah, you know what, you're doing it. What if we can make it do this? So we'll do the website maybe in the initial ones. You're just going to get the website going, and then 2 weeks later, it has a search function. 2 weeks later, it has a shopping function, and it just builds upon it. But now you have a team that is doing that and making sure that the components that they're doing can jive together, and that nobody's creating software that's going to, I guess you could say, conflict or cause a bug in another area, right? And how do you do that? So, so we'll go back to the waterfall base. As a project manager, you're looking more at being the belly button, right? Being the focal point to know where to go for the answers, or at least being not afraid to ask for those answers. And I found myself being that one, like, not afraid to go to, okay, who's in charge of this? Who do I need to speak to? And then asking the questions and trying to bridge those gaps between the different resources. And if there was a person, and by resources, I'll include people into the mix too, right? But let's say there's a certain individual, certain expertise that I needed. I know that you're paid by your timesheet to do a certain job, and not everybody has a budget for you to go and do something else. But one of my functions would be to go to that department manager and try to negotiate, like, hey, can I get this individual for maybe just like 4 hours every Tuesday, or 2 hours every Tuesday, you know, just to come in and give their input and share, so that we can make sure that this project is progressing. And in my case, it was working on a transportation management contract, and we were going and trying to expand our distribution channels, trying to make sure that we had the right lanes, the right networks, including our global teams, that they had everything they needed. And I, coming in, had some familiarity with being a bomb squad tech and how to run contracts, but not necessarily a project of that extent, and not transportation. But I was being paid for my soft skills of going out there and not being afraid to ask those questions. Now, if I was to go up a step further about a program manager is now going to be the one keeping all the information and metrics on all those different projects happening beneath them. So you could very well have, 2 to 20 projects underneath you, but you, at the program manager, are usually going to be at a higher strategic level. You're going to be worried. You're going to try to make sure that all those programs are aligning with you as a program manager, which is aligning with the overall objectives that the company has as a whole. Am I still going in line, because this is where we're going, and this is the three, because as a project, you might have your blinders on and not necessarily know. You just know, this is my deliverable. This is what I'm paid to do, paid to give, and focus on your baby. This is mine. But as a program manager, it's like, okay, making sure that one, if you're limited on resources, that you're able to spread the resources out at the right time, and that everybody can get there, be working effectively. But hey, are we all staring in the right direction? We don't want one person trying to turn the boat left, the other one right. Can we all go in that same direction? So hopefully that kind of helps. It's just kind of this ladder, this hierarchy as you go up the different titles.
Yeah, it was very interesting when I was interviewing for the role that I have now. The title itself, program manager, really was very intimidating because of that understanding of what it is, like managing multiple projects. And then like they put a 2 on the back of it, so it's program manager 2. And I was like, I don't know if I could do program manager 1, so how am I going to do 2? But at the end of the day, Microsoft actually has a little bit of a different approach, or at least how I see the program manager. Yes, we do have multiple projects, but it's almost more like multiple customer problems that we're solving, and each one of those is its own little individual project. And but then when I was doing release management, I would say it was a lot more like project management as a whole, because we're trying to hit a deadline consistently. We need so many things in place for that to happen. So but I always looked at it, or, I hear it even said internally, we're the voice of the customer. We're the voice of the customer. So it's like representing to engineering teams a customer viewpoint. So it is our responsibility to be looking at, data. Is our software crashing? Is it hanging? Are they hitting pain points consistently? We get tons of surveys that that we publish on everything from Twitter to in the product itself, and kind of pull back that feedback and ask, what are we running into? And then we do actual customer development where we're talking to customers themselves. So I know like Devin and Brenda here are both trying to get into engineering roles. And can you speak a little bit about like the role of the PM with the engineer? I'm happy to, but I'd love to hear your take on it, because you're going to have a different perspective than me. So.
Sure. Okay. And are we looking at construction type engineering? Or are we looking at electronical? Or
Oh, sorry, no, software engineering. They're both
software engineering.
Yeah.
Okay. So the experiences that I have right now have been mostly through my Agile coach in the last year and a half, learning it, and that's going to be through the Scrum Master and product owner training that I went through, and not necessarily as a program or project manager within there. But let's say if you had an engineer maybe on a software development team, and does Microsoft use a Scrum approach right now? Are they using Agile at all? Or
yes, in general, yes.
Okay.
I think there are some teams that may wiggle a little different, but most of them are Agile teams worth. I'm learning, because I just switched roles, learning a bunch of different buzzwords like t-shirt costing. I'm like, I like t-shirts, but what are you talking about? So
yeah. I love the concept of, the Agile, using Kanban, and just the way things are supposed to work. And I say it's supposed to because as more and more companies are doing it, I'm finding out that they're not really implementing it maybe as the book says. It's working, right? But there's definitely room for improvement, such as when you're doing that as a development team, you will meet up with your Scrum Master, your product owner, right? That's going to be your liaison with the customer, and saying, hey, this is the work we plan on doing the next 2 weeks. But also what you're doing is looking at your capacity. You're factoring in vacation time off, like how much actual experience you're going to be able to have during the next 2 weeks. And with knowing that, how much work are you willing to pull in from a backlog that has already been kind of constructed? The assignments have been on there with your product owner. Now, the engineers can be on kind of both sides, whether they're on the development team or also on the architect side of the house, to where you're sitting down and going with the product manager and the Scrum Master, trying to figure out all the little attributes that you might be building in as far as user stories and putting things on the backlog, so that way when your Scrum teams are ready to pull in work, they have a list to work off of. So it can kind of work in a twofold depending on your experience. And the looking at the new Scrum guide, which if you were to Google like Scrum guide, I think it's 2020, 2021, it's a free thing, and it shows you we're definitely trying to make it a little bit more broad in terms, because they wanted everybody to think about the team adding value, not necessarily the individual role. So even though I can come as a Scrum Master and not have a technical background, my job is to help remove impediments. As you as a development team, what is getting in your way, or what do you not have so you can do your job better? And that's how I added value to the overall. So how, as a development team, whatever your hat it is you're wearing, can add value within the next 2 weeks or at the end of the entire program, and deliver the customer the product that they want. So I love how the entire thing is going to unfold, and it's just a matter of everybody working their piece together. And the key word in there is alignment. Is everybody speaking together? Is the development team, the Scrum Master, the product owner, the business analyst, if you have one, are they all working towards that same thing, that, hey, the business owners and the customers are going to be pleased with what we give them, because ultimately they're going to invest in this. Like I said, you might not know exactly what's going to work. I don't have a complete requirements listing, but I do know that I'm going to have to pay for X amount of FTEs, right? How many men, or I'll say how many hours, labor hours is going to be in this, and I'm going to fund that. And what's going to come in? Am I going to be happy, or at least semi-pleased at the end of those 2 weeks? So I don't know if that helps with my perspective. I know from an Agile Scrum Master.
Yeah, I love the perspective, because typically it's our engineering managers truly that kind of hold those keys on what we're going to be able to deliver, and they just basically tell us that. So I have not had to do a whole lot of resource management, but I have had to work in patience, because like I want my thing made now, right? And
yeah.
Well, so and so is off for 2 weeks and we're not getting to this sprint, and well, let's look at it for Q4, things like that. So I think sometimes on that side for me, it's like, oh wait, I have to just kind of, everything is happening. It's just not happening I want this now.
Yeah. And see, that's
and
one of the weaknesses coming from, if you're waterfall based or been trained waterfall based or had that mentality and then trying to go into the agile mindset. It is so difficult because as a project manager on the waterfall based side, you have deadlines, like we got to hit it because this is like what's in the way, we got bam, 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 go now. And on this side, it's like, whoa, slow up. Like we want to make sure that things are going to, everybody's got to talk together. Like we have to be communicating, and they always say that agile is a mindset, not just a structure. So you have to be agile, not just do agile. So that puts a frame of reference that how much you really have to take time to understand the concepts.
Sure. And Devin does have her hand up. I do have a question that from what you said, but Devin may ask the same thing. So therefore,
yeah. I'm very new to the terms of the agile world. So I understand there's a Scrum Master. Is that usually their only job in a workplace, or do they, is it broad? Do they usually have a couple other hats they're wearing too?
It's going to depend on the maturity level of that organization and what Scrum model are they following, or excuse me, what Scrum model are they following? Because there's different organizations where you could be the Agile Alliance, you could be SAFe. So I'm a SAFe, a scaled Agile. So the training I received is how do you implement Agile into organization and then build it to where you have now teams of teams working this kind of hierarchical organization. So if they were in that environment, you could have a Scrum Master, and that's all they're going to be doing is just being a Scrum Master for either one team, maybe potentially like up to 4, but ideally you'd be just 1 to 2 teams that you're a Scrum Master for. Now, if it's a very young organization, then they may wear multiple hats, such as a Scrum Master and a product owner. So now not only are they sitting there and removing the impediments and facilitating the meetings of the Scrum team, they're also now that direct liaison with a customer or with the business owners, and they're trying to juggle both those hats, which could be good and bad because they're not necessarily have to be the technical expert, right? But they're just that customer liaison. So that could fluctuate. But some of the roles you'll hear product owner, which is going to be that liaison with the company face to the customer. You'll have the Scrum Master, and then you'll have the development team, and that's usually the 3 components that will form a Scrum team as its whole. I don't know if that helps answer.
That answered it completely. Thank you very much.
Roger that. Thank you.
Yeah, that was actually going to be the question I had, because some may not know just, well, what is Waterfall? What is that? And, Waterfall is very much more sequential project. And it's kind of the pathway maybe that you take to deliver, but the goal is always to deliver something. Scrum allows you to make a minimal viable product. We call those our MVPs. So you can make a minimal thing and then iterate over it again and again and again until you have exactly what you want. So you can deliver some features over time, and that's what we definitely do. Where we're like, well, we know we're going to have to address this after we ship it, but it shouldn't cause too much customer pain to ship it. And that's really what we're kind of always asking is what impact is this going to have on a customer? Is it, and what do we do next? So there's always that what's in the pipeline that we're going to start addressing or looking and experimenting on our data and things like that. So,
and there allows room for more change where, changes, I would say, is welcomed to a degree, whereas in a waterfall-based project, you don't really want a whole lot of change because a lot of your budgeting and all that stuff, your scheduling was kind of timed a certain way. So any change that's in there is really going to disrupt that entire plan. Whereas in the Scrum Agile world, there's more room for change, and in fact, you have the retrospectives where you'll get together at the end of the 2 weeks and say, hey, what worked well? What didn't work well? How do we want to change this? You'll have your morning meetings where really it's like a 10 to 15 minute ordeal where you time block everything and say, hey, what did you do yesterday? What are you going to do today? And what do you need help in? What impediments you have? So it's really focused on delivering the minimum, but I love the entire idea of working within capacity, being able to have those meetings and staying on point and just kind of going with the flow type of thing. It's a great concept.
I would chime in again because we have two that are trying to get into software development. Like that may be a little bit shocking is kind of what did you do when, if you have a morning sync every day and you're kind of like, what did you do yesterday? What did you deliver? And you're brand new, which is going to be a great segue when we talk about the 30, 60, 90-day plan in a minute. It could be very intimidating to kind of classify what you did because maybe what you did was just trying to figure out how things work. And you didn't deliver what you thought you could. And I think when I first came out of that career gap, I'm still struggle with it sometimes as over or underestimate how much time something will take me. And usually I would put more stress on myself early on because I didn't know how to do that. I didn't know how long something would take. So I would not give myself enough time to accommodate for factors outside of my control. So that will be a lot of learning, which may be a good way to start segmenting, like how do you onboard to a new role? And I'm not talking about just PM, just in general, like you got this new thing, you're excited about it, you want to go in and make an impact. And I've heard the 30, 60, 90, is that the right way to do it? Or are there better insights? But we should back up just a little bit and define what is a 30, 60, 90-day plan too. So
for sure. So
I just dumped a lot of questions. Sorry.
We'll kind of like go through them all. I would say just real quick as far as being new as an engineer or being new on a Scrum team, maybe that is how you're adding value that week. Maybe that is the entire thing that you're going to do. And I think the one thing that I love, especially with your first sprint or your first increment that you're going to work on, you might not have all its hours, so you can't really, you're not in the position, you don't have that data set to say this is what, so you adjust fire. And as a Scrum Master, it's not there to criticize you. You come up there and say, hey, I said I was going to do this. This is all I did. Okay, cool. Well, what got in the way? Why weren't you able to complete your objective? Or what did you do well that you were able to complete your objective? That way everybody else could benefit from that. So it's not to sit there to punish you and none of that. Like that, you're supposed to go in there. And if you have a Scrum Master that's doing that, then that they need to kind of have like a one-to-one with somebody, say, hey, slow down, be open-minded that we're progressing and we're going to be able to fix this. And the retrospective at the end of the 2 weeks, you'll sit down and kind of figure out what can we do differently as a team to fix maybe any of those big issues. But as a new person, everybody's going to understand you're new. And if you miss your shot by whatever, over or under, because it also matters if being able to be predictable on what you can deliver is going to matter at a time. So you want to be able to eventually get to a point to where you're estimating, but it's an estimate. It's exactly what it's called. So moving on into the onboarding roles, with sharing with my experiences, I went in with a mindset within the 30, 60, 90 of what do I got to do to demonstrate my worth and my value and how I can do this. Especially coming from the military and going into a civilian entity, I already knew that people were taking a gamble on me because I wasn't coming in there with the experience directly in the role that they were hiring me for. So I had to come in there demonstrating my soft skills and how I can apply the passions and the knowledge and the strengths that I had to the company and how I can add the value. And I'll share, like, there's 3 books that kind of stood out to me that kind of helped format my mentality when I went in to do what I was about to do. And ultimately, the first one is to observe, which is super hard for me. But don't go in there with all the answers, because you might have been successful in your previous role, but there's that saying that whatever got you here is not necessarily going to get you there. So it's being able to sit back and observe and try to figure out, okay, what are the different ways that I can add value. But speaking up at the right moments also was beneficial to know that I was able to contribute at the right times, or I wasn't afraid to be part of a team and say, hey, maybe this is something we can work on, or this is an observation I made from a previous, I don't know if it's relevant here, right? Speaking more, I spoke more vaguely in general terms, that not that I had the answer, but here's something that you maybe could consider. If it's useful, cool. If not, then all right, cool. But I think that being humble enough to not take it personal if for whatever reason they didn't accept your idea, because coming from a previous position where you were the guy with the answers, I was the guy going to commander staff meetings and was looked to as a subject matter expert and being able to provide the commander that I was not that role anymore. So complete my shift going from a role where you are in charge of 17 people to where I'm a minion in charge of nobody, right? And trying to I would say, find a way to show that I was a worthwhile investment, right? So I would definitely focus on observing, trying to learn my role, learn my routine. I had set my own personal goal, knowing that I wanted to figure out my boss. What are the things that I could do to eventually be eligible for that position? And that was a question I asked during my initial one-on-one, was, that I didn't want to appear to be a threat or anything like that, but I knew that I was a person that could add value, and I wanted to demonstrate that as quickly as possible. And what are some of those things that are the most important that allow me to be eligible for your seat one day? I did it. I got some answers, but I would say they were pretty vague. I still didn't feel like I had complete direction. So I just knew that I was going to, here's one thing I ended up doing is, if you're working for a public company, I pulled up the company's 10Ks, or their annual reports that they file with the SEC, their tax reports every year. And I read that to figure out, where is the company saying that they're going? What is important to the strategic vision? And then inside of the 10K, they also would list some of their competitors. So then I would pull up the competitors' 10K and what's important to them. And this is where some of maybe my schooling from the MBA, I go to the Jack Welch Management Institute, and one of the things Jack Welch was promoting was, you need to know your competition inside and out, right? If they're important, you need to know what moves have they been making in the last 3, 4, 5 years. What move do you think they're going to make? What keeps you up at night? And being able to look at my top 3 competition and then put that in together with the strategic vision, I was able to start formulate thoughts and come up with the game plan of how I wanted to make the moves within the department that I was, I should say the job that I was given. And how do I make everything alignment? Alignment is key. So knowing those things, knowing the big picture, keeping that in mind, as well as my role and my level of influence, which was minimal. And then being able to just kind of keep that in my scope, I guess you could say, helped. And then I would also encourage not being afraid to get to know people. I think one of the first things I did was, first 2 things I did. The first thing I did was, the project I was doing was going to influence a lot of change, because it was over the transportation arena, which we were implementing a lot of new things. So instead of sending an email, I actually did a quick little 2-minute video where I recorded myself, because I was brand new. Gave a quick little 30-second intro, that they were going to see emails soliciting information, why I was soliciting this information, what exactly I was doing, and when they start seeing these emails with my name on it, and that was it. So I sent out that video to the supply chain section, and it ended up it put me in good graces, because not only was now the director, she was pleased, the VP of supply chain was like, oh, that was very awesome. It was something new. So now I stood out because I did something new that was positive and helped educate everybody I was going to come in contact with. So if you can make yourself indispensable, but also known in a good light, it helps. I forgot the second thing was going to be.
That's okay.
Oh, networking. That was one. Networking. First, I started out with my team. Staying within that 90-day window, I wanted to be able to get out and first call the people that worked in my section. So I would try to set up a meeting, and just communicate, just have virtual coffee, right? And then I started reaching out to some of those key points that I knew that I needed, as far as like the folks in legal, the folks in quality. Like you'll get an idea. Ask your people, like, who do you think I'm going to need? Because you've been here for a while, so respect their experience. Like, who am I going to need a relationship with that's going to make me successful? And then go out there and establish that relationship. And same thing, if you're going to be doing an interview, or you're going to meet somebody for a job, or you're doing this, try to just have coffee with that person, or a virtual coffee, and you're just talking, just to get to know them. Ask them what's important to them. Ask them, let them talk about themselves, whatever that is, because what you want to do is be able to establish the reasons to have a second conversation, and that you're not enemies, that we're all on the same team. And I think those kind of helped whenever I started doing things and I needed questions and setting my goals, is being able to have people within the company that I can ask questions to and kind of help maybe refine what I was putting on my own personal development plan.
Yeah, I could chime in a lot of that, especially because I have been onboarding to a new team. And when I first came in, don't be afraid to ask questions. I was told that when I was mentored before I landed in that role, don't be afraid to ask questions. And then I found myself kind of afraid to ask questions still anyway, because when I first started, it kind of felt like I was in the Charlie Brown classroom And then the teacher was, I didn't know what anybody was talking about. They're talking about like just terminology, acronyms, all of it. And I literally had a OneNote open in every meeting I was in, and I just typed anything I didn't understand. And then I would go back to my desk and either Google it, or immediately, if I had a team member that was, what were they talking about there? And I can attest to Matt, who's on this call, was very patient with just explaining, in great detail, like, this is what it means when we're building software, when people are doing pull requests, and to because when you're dealing with a product like Visual Studio, we have over 30 teams contributing to it, and version control, and what we're actually shipping versus what is being built, and all that stuff it can feel extremely overwhelming at first, because you don't want to, I kind of was terrified. I'm like, I work for Microsoft, and the last thing I want to do is be the person that causes bad press for Microsoft because I did something wrong, right? So, and it was funny because I was talking to other coworkers, and they almost had the opposite feeling of that, where it's like, it's Microsoft. If somebody else hasn't screwed it up by now, we're fine. They're smart people. We'll figure out anything I break. And I'm like, how about if we don't break it to begin with? So
Right.
There is a little bit of two approaches to a new role that really bring, or I should say, maybe not even approaches, personality pieces, right? Because I'm introverted. So therefore, me wanting to reach out to a bunch of people who I don't know their level. I don't know what it means. When I look in the address book, some are senior, some aren't, some are principal, and now I know directors. I just emailed them all the same, right? I didn't know the difference. So
Yeah.
like, understanding your organization chart is kind of a big deal. Like, how many clicks are you from CEO? And then who are all these people that lead along the way, that you run into along the way? That's super important to pause and understand that. And then I'm going to echo, meet people, and do those virtual, find out what they do on the team, so that you know who to contact when you have questions. Brenda chimed in chat that she has the "what if I break something" fear.
Yeah.
But the true answer is you are going to break something at some point. And somebody else has broken it before too, and we know how to back it up. We know how to undo. And when you're in a company like Microsoft, when you have smart people all working on the same problems, somebody's going to have that area of expertise. And my husband has said it before, like when we've seen some major internet failures, and it turns out, an intern changed the code. The problem was not with the intern. It was in the person who did the code review. They should have been on that. They should have that's why the expertise is there. So if that happens, then the process is broken, and now you have a chance to iterate over the process. And it is scary when you're like, we're going to have to root cause this. And you're like, I'm human, and I am the root cause. It's me, I'm the root cause. That's uncomfortable, but it's not done in a way of judgment and like, we're going to throw the book at you and you're out of here. And no, it's done in, okay, what broke in this process so that we don't do it twice.
There was one video. So here's another thing that I did. Learn as much as you can, right? Like you said, learn. I went in and luckily the company I was working for had a lot of videos that was stored in there about like past annual their strategic meetings they had. And I went in there and I was watching some, and I was listening to the CEO. And in fact, the CEO stated one thing that really stuck into my mind, right? That if there's a problem, something goes wrong, tell us immediately. Because then at that point, it's our problem. Right. But if you try to sweep it under the rug, you try to hide it, or it keeps going on, then that becomes your problem. And then now I have to handle it as your problem. So if you don't own it up front and you can't fix it when it's still early, then, that's a different ethical issue, right? Now there's integrity and everything else that rolls into that. But early up front, you make a mistake, own it and go on. And it's just one of those things that, I think you hit it on the head too. Being in the quality mindset, I always look at the process first. I tried not to blame the person. It was one of those things that you do the 5 whys, like something and allowed this to happen. What did it? Was it something that as we were creating it where we don't have the right blocks in place, or we didn't offer the right training, or something along that line happened. Every now and then you might have maybe some negligence that was a root cause. Okay, cool. But I used to do the 5 whys of, you just keep asking the question why. Well, why did this happen? Why? And then usually if it got down to a person, well, because Brenda's an idiot. Well, you go back up one and then you try to tackle that, right? Because then you at least entertain the idea of that could have been a reason why things unfolded the way that they did. But yeah, own it and go. Yeah, own it and
Also,
fix it.
I'm going to echo just a little bit of last week's call. We had Diana Valera here, and she recommended a book. And I'll just for the ladies on here, the How Women Rise. I started listening to that on the plane yesterday, and it does go with the what it's written in cooperation with the same person who did What Got You Here Won't Got You There, or Won't Get You There. So it's so insightful on things that we do, because a lot of times, and I'm just going to advocate for women, a lot of times we will blame ourselves first and solely, and we need to not do that. It's like, just take a step back and like, what can I learn from it? But it may be that you were asked to do something that you weren't ready to do yet, or you just didn't get clarity. And that's another thing when you're early, is ask the clarifying questions. Like, if you don't understand something, again, I had to lean on Matt so much when I'm like, okay, I just got asked to do this thing. What are they talking about, actually? Because I don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
And you'll find those patient coworkers who will spend as long as it needs to get you onboarded. And sometimes that's the other hard part, is you may think, I should be getting this by now. It can take 18 months before you walk into a meeting and you're like, I just rocked that meeting. And I lived the first year, because we got a sign-on bonus when I started, and I was like, if you left within the first year, you had to pay it back. And I was just like, I just want to make it till April 1st, 2020, so that I know I won't have to pay the sign-off bonus back for being fired for doing it all wrong.
Incentives.
I recognize that for sure. Just a quick thing to add to that. I think that if you ask anybody who's been in role for a while, they will all have a story of how they broke something, or in career. I think we've all done it. I can remember vividly the day I said, hey, I completed rebuilding the server that I needed to. Oops, that was the wrong server. That was actually the only production server for that customer. Oops, I guess I better go fix that. But the reality is that, we all make mistakes, and sometimes it's completely unintentional. I mean, I had things not in my favor in the fact that I had two servers with the exact same name. So the likelihood of it was probably pretty high. But at the same time, I did it. And you just have to fess up to it and do it, and realize that everybody else has done it as well. It may be in a different way. I also remember the day I was at years ago. I worked in banking, and I did check sorting at night, and I sorted all the checks and everything else. And I couldn't help it. There was this button that said "Do not press." Well, what that means. You have to press the button. Oh. And I did, and I started a fire, because the machine stopped at 100, moving paper at 100 miles an hour. Eventually the paper gets hot and it caused a problem. You just have to, I think sometimes you're going to have those things, and know that those things happen. And every person, they may not have lit something on fire, but you ask the senior person on your team, and they're like, they may not really, not everybody will admit it, but everybody's had those things that they've done. They're like, oh, so remember that those things happen. And just, I think the thing you can do is, as you lean on someone, like it sounds like you've leaned on Matt, I think it's a great way to learn from the mistakes that you've made. So at least hopefully you learn not to catch something on fire and you make a different mistake.
Yeah.
And I think as long as you have a leader that understands that same concept too, right? That really is going to come up to whoever your supervisor is, or supervisor, what culture are they trying to really bring, and that they understand that mistakes happen. If you have one of those tyrants that are like, no, it'll never happen again, that might not be the best relationship, and that might be things like, am I in the right organization? Am I in the right culture? Does this fit for me? And that could be something to consider, which is also another hard choice to make. But if you have somebody that's not going to help you in your path to professional development, which is an everyday task, right, then that's something to consider. And one of the things I used to live by too, with when to ask questions. Sometimes the right time to ask a question is in a meeting, or maybe I could just ask my boss when I'm done, or a peer. Some questions I felt better asking somebody on my peer, because then I didn't look bad at my boss. But then other questions like, no, I'm going to need to hit this direct from my boss. And others, I need to ask this directly in the meeting, because depending on what that meeting is about, you could be expected to perform when you leave that room. So it was one of those things like, okay, hey, the minute you leave this room, I expect that everybody understands their task, roles, and objectives, and that from here, this is your opportunity. And then let me ask, because if that's the pressure, then I need to get some clarification. So it's there's different levels of ask depending on the severity of the question, or just maybe your comfort level as well. So
yeah, Matt, you have your hand up. Please
Oh,
chime in.
I apologize. I didn't even see that. I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, no,
That's okay. That's why I'm moderating over here.
Roger that.
gonna ask a question, maybe tie something in that you said earlier about networking. And oops, sorry. Hopefully you can hear me better now.
Yeah.
Sorry. Just tie something Ken you said about networking, and as you networked, in addition to the people working on the project, were you networking, trying to find mentors or other people around in other parts of the organization? And then the topic now about making mistakes. As you talk to some of those other people, did that help put things in perspective where if you made a mistake, even if you had a boss that was slightly perhaps tyrannical, your word, or overreacting, that some of those people could give a little bit of feedback. Yeah, that was, you shouldn't have done that. That was a mistake. Hopefully you learned something. But to put it in perspective, that's not really going to kill the company. Don't worry. We're not going bankrupt tomorrow because of that.
No, let's say so. Yes, on all accounts. I think I looked for a mentor a little bit later on, but I ended up finding one person that I leaned on the most for some of that candid conversation, the one that I could rely on to tell me, because we would end up joking, we would talk to each other every day, and he ended up becoming a friend. And it got to one of those points of like, okay, a hard part was transitioning everything that I used to operate from a military perspective, when you have a pretty much kind of like this command and control, to now working into a not a civilian sector. So it was good to have a sounding board. Like, this is what I'm thinking. This is what I'm about to do. Am I right? Like, what am I going to do? It's like, well, you might not want to do that because that is a director. I was like, but because I had a mentality, like, I didn't care who you were, right? Like, I don't care about your rank or your title. It don't matter. Like, this is right or wrong, right? And unfortunately, there is a political atmosphere at times that he would coach me on how to navigate those waters. That way, I didn't go making the, how I word it, there's certain people you didn't really want to tick off that could really make the rest of your career that much harder. So navigating those waters, he helped me a lot with that. Yeah. On the mentor side of the house, it took me a little while, but I finally was able to reach out, and then I ended up getting an exec that, when I told him kind of what my interests and passions were, he ended up setting up weekly. I only had 15-minute conversations with him, but every week for 15 minutes, I was able to get his time. So it was my job at that point to make sure that I had a list of questions, or if he gave me an assignment, to meet it, because with his position, it was, 15 minutes, I don't even know what that was worth in dollar value, right? Because, he was a VP, and the fact that I had to respect that relationship just because I valued it. So the fact that took me a little while to get, but I was super excited once I got it, because I had the ambitions. I saw myself that one day I wanted to be on that board. What can I do to get there? And he was actually willing to coach me. I at times thought that maybe people in my direct chain felt intimidated or threatened that I wanted to get them out of their seat, because if you come home and I'm talking to my wife, I exactly felt that way, right? Like, I can do that job, like that was what I had inside me. But did I really mean that? Like, no, I'm not trying to kick anybody out of a job. I just knew I had me to do that job. So having somebody to finally open up and share helped out a lot.
It's often, a lot of times when you ask those questions of mentorship or something, you get your own light bulb moments, and it's that rubber ducky effect. If people know what that is like, you have a rubber ducky on your desk and just start talking to your duck with a problem, and then all of a sudden, the light bulb comes on. But that sounding board is really, really great. And if you can find that when you first join an organization, it can really, it's not just about, are you doing the job well? It's, are you conducting yourself in the right way? Are you, they could review an email that you sent and just say, is this professional? Because I was really intimidated when I first started at Microsoft with getting emails. People had links in them all over the place, and they were, very well written often. And I came from stay-at-home mom world where we just say it like what we need, and there was this aspect of, I was maybe too casual on just emailing. But I was also terrified too, because I didn't know who I was emailing. They were like, oh, we need to accomplish this thing, so send out emails. And I'm like, to who? And I was like, well, use this chart, that might help. And I'm like, oh, great. Now I'm I don't know who I'm emailing and if it's the right person or if I'm even wording the ask right. So learning things like that, a mentor could have helped a lot on some of those things. Even coming into the new role I have now, I literally reached out to one of my fellow PMs. I'm like, how do you PM? Because I'm really having a hard time with the paradigm switch of what this job role looks like versus the last one. And how do you build this process? And they were very patient to just, okay, I always look at this first, the second, this third, and I made a little checklist. So if I get lost, I can always return to the checklist.
I love checklists. It's just,
I make a lot of them.
I was going to share
on how to do things in case I get lost. Yeah.
This book, Guide to Managerial Communication. Now, I'm not saying it's like the golden book. It was something that was required for my schooling, one of the first classes. And I kind of like dismissed it. I didn't really pull on it. But then you hit all those things. You're like, you need to be more succinct, more to the point. Like the people I was emailing, their time is important, it's valuable. So then I started really looking on here because it has charts. What kind of message are you sending? Is it better for a phone call? Is it better for a face-to-face? You know, and just leaning on this from time to time, just for a quick little like sanity check, like, is there a different or a better way to do this? And then Grammarly, you know, I mean, I'm not affiliated for them or anything, but that was a tool that I used and was able to plug into my Microsoft Outlook that kind of helped reformat some words, just especially when you start talking to executives. Can I just maybe word this differently or better? Because I felt at times that, man, I look like I'm uneducated with some of these emails that when Grammarly gets a hold of it. But yeah, I mean, the people that you email, their time is important. You need to get to the point. So I started using the bottom line up front method a lot too. You know, here's or too long to read type of thing. You know, put it right up front. Boom, bullet point, and then background summary. And then if you needed to explain, there's an explanation at the bottom. But they had the gist of it within the first, 3 to 5 sentences or lines, and you move on. So yeah.
We are getting close to like just 10 minutes left. Does anybody have any specific questions? I can keep asking questions all day. I think we only scratched like 2 or the 3 that I had written down. So happy to let anybody chime in if they have questions. Devin, your hand is up. Great. I love questions.
I was just wondering if you could revisit the 30, 60, 90-day plan a little bit. That's mostly about setting goals, correct? Yeah,
there's a different question too. When I was interviewing, I was told, write out your 30, 60, 90-day plan as part of an interview tool to bring in, and which I did, but nobody ever asked for that. Like it was extraneous. I tried to volunteer it at once because I put so much work into making it cool. But yeah, I would love to hear.
Yeah. So with my approach on that one was the observe and learn the objectives. Like what is important to this organization? What's important to my boss? What's important to my boss's boss? If you can get the strategic vision, just kind of using that time frame to be a fly on the wall, see how the meeting is going, see how people flow. At the same time, formulate a plan. Like, where do I see myself? Where do I want to go? And what are the things that I need to do? Like, what are the relationships that I need to form? What are the tasks and also, I would say that's a big one, identifying what tasks are going to help you stand out. Now, the job description is something good to lean on because you know it's going to be graded. So if there's any weaknesses on the job description, maybe like, hey, I can benefit here, then maybe highlight those areas and then find ways to improve those, whether you use, LinkedIn Learning or one of those, any online. I mean, you'd be surprised if you find on YouTube. LinkedIn Learning is really one of those go-to tools that I use. My library gives me free access to it, so it could be something to look at too if they do that. But really look at that first 30 minutes, first 30 days, really trying to observe and see how are you going to be able to add value. Then I would actually say within the remaining time between the 60 and 90 is to demonstrate the value you can add and over deliver on those, right? So try to over promise and then really over deliver, because at that point in time, I wanted to demonstrate. I felt not just like I wanted to, get a promotion like that, but I had to justify my credibility coming in as a military guy with no experience in transportation to saying, hey, this is how I can do it. And I could tell you that with my first meeting, having to demonstrate an annual strategic plan, being able, all the homework I did trying to learn the shortages. I mean, I joined organizations, transportation, different nonprofit organizations to try to learn from these. I started going to these monthly webinars and everything. I mean, it wasn't just on the clock type stuff. It was on the clock is what I did, but then a lot of personal time I invested to to show that I wanted to learn, I wanted to make a difference, and this is what I'm able to do. And then it's just executing that, putting everything you did in those. And then if you could, I would say, if your boss is willing to do it within at the end of that 3-month period, am I on the right path? Like, am I meeting, like, how do you feel within this? And which way am I going? Am I going in the right direction? Because there was a couple things that I found out at the end of my 90 days that I thought I was meeting all the marks, but there was a couple areas that I didn't realize were important to my supervisor that I now knew. It was highlighted. It's okay. Now I'll bring that to the top of my list and try to be more considerate. And that was one of the things too. It just wasn't something it wasn't on my radar. And just by asking that question, how am I performing? How am I doing? Like, these are and sharing your goals. Like, these are the goals. This is what I want. This is what I intend to do while I'm in this position here. Because then, with her knowing everything not only just implementing everything she was giving me, but how I was going to use that as far as my own personal development plan. So if you can do a personal leadership development plan or development plan, how to get yourself not just the next role or next promotion, but 2 promotions down, and just trying to start slowly. I know it's a lot to ask for in that 30, 60, 90, but I was trying to make a mark. Like, that was my whole objective, was to make a mark and to get people to know me on a positive limelight. And if I could find a way to make myself indispensable, that's what I want to do. Because the more value I can add, and if I could end up being that person where now you leaned on me. And I would say there was a couple programs that I was the belly button for. And, before people were calling me for questions, that wasn't even my wheelhouse. And it felt like a good place to be. It was like, I don't know the answer, but I know who to connect you with. So it just kind of kept compounding from there, just really trying to execute. And number one, you want to make your boss look good. Like, that was my objective. If I could make my boss look good, then obviously I was doing something right. I never wanted to put my boss in a position that seemed bad or that seemed to be unethical or illegal. But if I went in that mentality that I want to make my boss look good, and trust me, some days that was a hard pill to swallow, because some days, you just might not see eye to eye, but like, but you know what? That's if I am not able to get past that, then why would the company invest in me any further if I'm going to be that petty? Right? There's no reason for me to excel, because then that means that I'm not willing to make my boss look good. That means I'm not willing to make a CEO look good. It was for me, it was a good mentality to have, to kind of keep on my moral compass of things. So I don't know if those experiences help. I would say the book that helped me that I ended up getting is The First 90 Days. It really is. It talks about from a leader perspective. This one is The First 90 Days by Michael Watkins. And he really hits it from what you were going to do as a leadership, and he wants you to write it out, write your goals out. And that's another thing, is to write as much as it out, what you want to do, and remember where you're going, because it is easy to get sidetracked in a new position, because everything's new. It's coming at you from all directions. Be like, okay, is this worth learning right now? Or do I need to put that on the back burner? I'm just going to put that kind of on my to-do list, because I love learning. If I would have learned this task, it would have not made me as strong as something else that I should have been focusing on in the transportation realm, just because I would have had more fun down here, right? So keeping that in mind, I think, was putting me on the right path for success when I first got hired on, I guess you could say.
Yeah. I had it also summarized, just like the first 30 days, get to know your company and your organization and your team. In like the next 30, really understand, and obviously you can squeeze these faster, like, because for me it turned my 60-day plan became my 30-day plan pretty quick. Understand the project you're on, understand the goals of your team, like the goals of what is that end result that you're going for, and then that 90 days, like, deliver your first piece of impact. So if you're a software engineer, it would be kind of like, okay, how does my company work? Do I have access to everything I need? One of the top things is to start asking, what are the reoccurring meetings that I need to be added to the invite? And make sure you're added to that. And then say, what do I need to access to do my job? And then click on those links and see if you have access, because sometimes access can take a while. So your first 2 weeks are probably going to be like swimming in just getting things sorted out. And then I would say that the true gold is to give yourself grace to maybe hit the goals that you set out, and maybe you don't, but you can, like, there's always another 90 days, right? Until we're done with life, we always have another 90 days. So you can always realign day one and say, all right, where did I steer myself wrong here? What can I do in the next 30 days? What can I do in the next 60 days? What can I do in the next sprint? And you can you're in control. Like, it doesn't have to be in a bucket. Like, you have the power to do that, but give yourself grace when you don't hit those goals, because those are the
short
ones
wins
that will beat you up on the inside. And that's not how you become your best employee, the best employee. And I have to tell myself, I'm coaching myself right now because I am in a new role. And like this last week, I'm like, I'm never going to get this. I don't know what I'm doing. And then I was like, okay, but what do I know right now? I took several steps back, and I was like, all right, I'm just telling engineering what needs to happen. So let me just write what needs to happen and how to do it. And now we can go and start ripping that apart on whether I designed it well. But at least there's a spot to start with. So
definitely the short wins, right? Oh, I'm sorry to interrupt you. My bad.
No, go ahead. I was just, we are getting super close to time, and I just want to make sure people have a chance to drop like LinkedIn profile links if they want to connect with each other. Then feel free to do that. But other than that, close us out here. Like,
I was just going to capitalize. It's really those short wins. If you come in there and produce, I keep saying adding value, right? What's important to your boss, important to the company. Like, a short win is going to help. Not only that you can say, here's a deliverable, no matter what size it is, right? Here's a product, and here I did it early. I did it, and if you're in the project manager role, if you're waterfall based, then there's a mentality that you might have that has to be perfect. Try not to have that mentality, right? Don't know what done is, what is going to be enough, and it doesn't need to be perfect. And also, I would say, be able to problem solve, because don't be that person that needs to go to your boss for every answer, because then why did they hire you, right? Why are you here if you're still going to your boss and your boss is still wasting their time on that problem? That's what you're here for. So know what's in your wheelhouse and what's expected of you, and to live up to it, and then know when you need to seek help. And okay, I'm not looking for you to solve my problem. I have some solution. I'm just looking maybe for some guidance, or maybe help me steer appropriately. I got this, but I just want to make sure I'm operating within the wheelhouse here. So I have 3 books I wanted to recommend that were in here. First was The First 90 Days by Michael Watkins. The 10X Rule by Grant Cardone, because I realized I was setting my goals really short. It gave me a perspective of, shoot for the moon, and so what if I miss, right? At least if I got 80% to the moon, that's much better than. I'd rather set a goal for 5 million than a goal for 500. Because if I set up a goal for 500, I miss it, $500, and I miss it, then I only got like $400. That's still okay with. But if I set a goal for 5 million and I miss it, well, maybe I earned 2 million, right? So it really was a mentality. And then Jack Welch, he has a book called Winning. That there were some parts in there really put perspective on things that I needed to be responsible for myself, and just kind of like, more of that business mentality, which I desperately needed coming from the nonprofit government sector, now going for a for-profit entity. So hopefully that helps you the same way that it helped me.
Yep, I think those are great. And we're at time here. So thank you everyone for coming, and Ken, especially for your time and volunteering for this. It gave a lot of great insight. For every time I have one of these calls, I'm like, okay, now I need to go back and rethink everything that I'm doing and change. But I appreciate your time and everyone who joined us today. So
yeah, for sure.
I will turn off our recording.